Hello and welcome to the level 69 dungeon Castrum Abania. This instance contains 3 boss fights, each of which with varying mechanics and uniquity, and some cool visual nods towards previous Final Fantasy titles that might just make you smile. Without further ado, let's look at boss number 1. This is Magna Rhoda. This boss is half motorbike and half monster, and he likes to move around the room, as you might have guessed. His first ability is Magitech Fire 3. This is a burst of fire that you will need to AoE heal through that is unavoidable. His second ability is Wild Speed. Firstly, the boss will plot out an orange line AoE to avoid, then a second, and then a third, and then a fourth. Once these fade, the boss will dash across the lines in the order and direction he placed them. This begins the first phase transition where you need to get him out of running around. You'll need to destroy one of the 2 Legion Optios around the room, these NPC ads. These ads will guard a cannon on either side of the room. Once you've killed the ads, you're able to use the cannon. A direct hit at Magna Rhoda will actually stop him from dashing, and it will return the boss to a normal attackable phase. His third ability is Magitech Fire 2. Unlike his AoE Magitech Fire 3, Magitech Fire 2 is a targeted circle that you just need to move out of. Aside from a rushing around, taking usually a minimum of 2 phase rotations, the boss should die relatively easy. So let's get on to boss number 2. Boss 2 is probably my favourite of the expansion so far, named simply number 24 in Roman numerals. This is a spitting image of Magimasher from previous old Final Fantasy games. His abilities then. Stab is a painful attack that needs to be healed through, which is on your tank, which causes damage to be a little bit spiky on the tank throughout the fight. His second ability is to summon 3 pillars into the room. You should be familiar with these things by now. Put 1 person in each one to absorb the majority of a powerful attack that happens as these fade. Thirdly is the ability I like the most. This is Barrier Shift. Barrier Shift is a cast ability that puts 3 circles on the ground. Each of these circles has a different elemental buff: lightning, fire, and ice. The boss will say something in the equivalent of "my cup runneth over fire and ice," for example, always leaving one of the elements out from the text box. You need to go stand in and get the buff from the elemental circle he doesn't mention. So if he says cup runneth over fire and ice, you need to go to the thunder one, for example. Failure to get the correct buff causes a knockback onto you when you try to do any DPS or action to him, and will reflect a large amount of damage back at you. His fourth ability then is Gale Cut. This is just a series of circles on the floor to avoid before they fade that do a large amount of damage. Aside from the Barrier Shift ability, the fight is rather simple, but personally very enjoyable. Moving on then to the last boss of this dungeon, Inferno. This green Hulk monster periodically takes modifications throughout the fight to make his attacks stronger, eventually swelling up much like a steroid-addled balloon with performance enhancers. His abilities then. Rahu Blaster is a frontal line AoE to avoid that fires yellow laser beams across the map. His second ability is Ketu and Rahu. This puts segments of AoEs to avoid on the floor by standing between them, and also a proximity explosion marker that does damage based on your distance from it. Move as far away as possible into a safe area before stopping to limit the damage from a proximity circle and avoid the segmented damage. After a while, the boss goes to the pump at the end of the room and receives his first upgrade. He then casts Ketu and Rahu again, only this time it's preceded by a different ability, with 2 large AoE circles to avoid and a third put on a party member via this big red circle, which that player must spread away from the rest of the group to avoid extra damage. Once these have disappeared, he drops the familiar segmented AoEs from Ketu and Rahu and the proximity AoE to avoid again. This fight is all about the same abilities being changed or added to slightly every time he gets injected and swells up in size. In addition to Rahu Blaster, he now has the Ketu Slash ability. This is a melee attack to heal your tank through, adding more spike damage. Once he gets his second injection, you're faced with 3 ads. 2 Deathclaws are attached to players and 1 Legion Packer that is not. You need to kill the Deathclaws first, especially if one is on your healer, and then the Legion Packer. The boss will now use the same abilities as before the injection, just now more frequently. His third injection is his last, you'll be pleased to know. He now has visibly red glowing claws. His attacks don't seem to be much different, just slightly more damage. At this point he will be very close to death anyway, so you shouldn't see much of this phase at all. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.